All right. Now I know we've got a ton of questions, so I think let's just get started in the interest of time. All right. So here we are. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our Build with Mapbox Ask Me Anything. This is the final session of Build 2024. So it's a little bittersweet, but also one of my favorite sessions. I love hosting the AMAs, and I'm looking forward to all of your questions and all of our great speakers here today. This is a time to engage with engineers and product leads from across Mapbox, asking questions and listening to what other developers are asking. So this year we did invite pre-submitted questions. So we will be starting with those. We also referred some questions from previous build sessions. So we'll also be working with those questions. We've organized them a little bit by theme, and we'll have them up on a slide so that you can see which ones we are answering. In some cases, we combined similar questions. We will still likely have time for live questions though, so please, if you do have a question you'd like to ask our answerers today, please submit it through the Q&A box in your Zoom window. That is the easiest way for us to keep track of them and make sure we don't lose your question. The chat is also open. Feel free to chat with other participants there. I know a lot of our speakers will be dropping links and maybe follow-ups on some of the questions in the chat. And yeah, so please also, if you do want translation, that is available. You just have to control that through the caption options in your Zoom window. And finally, we are recording this session like all of the build sessions, and it'll be shared along with all the other sessions next week to everyone who registered for build. Okay. So yeah, let's get started. Let's see who we have here with us today. We've got a lot of folks online to answer all your questions. Let's go around the virtual table. Just give a short introduction, your name, where you're joining us from today, and your role at Mapbox. Maybe if there's anything in particular you'd love to answer questions about. So yeah, let's just follow the list on this slide. Stefan, you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Stepan. I'm from the Helsinki office of Mapbox, and I'm working on the maps rendering, specifically on the GLJS. So if you have any questions about GLJS, please contact me. Thanks.
And Sam?
I'm a technical support engineer at Mapbox, and I help our customers work with our product.
And Sean, you want to go next?
Hello, everyone. My name is Sean McNutt. I'm a technical support engineer here at Mapbox, and I help everybody with supporting mobile.
Hey everyone, I'm Camille and I'm here in Brooklyn, New York. I'm the navigation product manager here at Mapbox, and I focus on navigation guidance and also our bring your own navigation data product.
Hey everyone, I'm Rob Andre, coming from lovely Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a navigation product manager at Mapbox, focusing on our core routing services with our directions API.
Good morning or afternoon. I'm Ryan Leidig. I am the product head for our on-demand logistics APIs to include Matrix, isochrones, and optimization.
Hey everyone, this is Antonio calling from Washington, DC. I work on navigation SDK engineering, and also a particular area of interest, everything around connecting our maps and navigation to GPTs and LLMs.
Hi, everyone. Joel Gruen. I'm based in Seattle. I am a product manager on the Maps team, responsible for a lot of the custom data that our users bring to the maps.
Hi, all. I'm Patrick. I'm an engineer on our Maps SDK team, working with Android, iOS, and Flutter, and I'm based in Washington, DC.
Hello, I'm Alistair Miller. I'm just outside of Washington, D.C. I'm the product manager for our imagery and raster tile sets.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ansel Manning. I am an engineering manager on our search side, specifically working with our points of interest data.
Hey all, this is Murat Bahar. I'm a product manager in search team in Mapbox. I'm responsible for search APIs and SDKs.
I'm Liz Summerfield. I'm your friendly neighborhood solutions architect coming to you from Arlington, Virginia, and I work across all products, across all different types of use cases, helping our customers get their products launched.
I'm Corey Gastini, a solutions architect here at Mapbox based in DC. Like Liz, I touch all Mapbox products. I have particular interest in tiling and just all geospatial data processing.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Nave. I'm a customer success manager and I'm based in Denver, Colorado, and I work specifically with our PayGo customers, get the most usage out of Mapbox.
Hi, I'm Leah Mikalinka. I'm based in Austin, Texas. I'm also a customer success manager focused on customers in our pay-as-you-go segment.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for joining us live today. All right, let's get started. So our very first question is all about navigation. We had a few submitted about Beyond. So Camille, could you help us with these?
Yeah, definitely. So is it possible to apply Directions API to a private data set, such as a road or utility network on another third-party map? Yes, you can now do this with the Bring Your Own Data or Beyond product. Essentially, you can upload that data then to exclude specific zones or polygons currently. And in 2025, you will soon be able to upload preferred routing for specific or specified roads and road segments. What geometry types does Beyond support today? Currently polygon features only, but as I said before, we will soon be able to support road segments or polylines as well. And then what is the max number of polygons to upload at a time per data set? We recommend to upload no more than 5,000 polygons currently. And then also for Mapbox tile set sources, which is the data management solution, I think it's 50 megabytes per data is the limit as well. Does data set size affect Directions API latency? That also definitely is a contributor. This is something we recommend divvying up your data sets to optimize essentially the Directions API performance. How frequently can I upload my Beyond data? You can upload as much as I believe 5-minute increments. That's the quickest or most dynamic you can change and upload your Beyond data today. And then I think I already answered the data set size. And can you use Beyond with Mapbox Nav SDK today? Yes, you certainly can. To really get the full Beyond experience, you can visualize using our Mapbox tiling service and show those within the Nav SDK. So visualizing your zones, and then also you can influence that routing around those zones as well with the Mapbox Nav SDK with turn-by-turn directions.
Great, fantastic. Thanks for kicking us off with the litany of questions there, Camille. Let's go to our next one. Now this one's for Ryan. Can Mapbox Optimization V2 also automatically determine the number of vehicles needed based on provided locations and their pickup and delivery time?
Quick answer is yes. Obviously there's a limited and finite amount of vehicles that exist. You don't have a flexible amount of vehicles sitting in your parking lot or your motor pool. So, but what will happen is if the most efficient way of routing all your vehicles requires less than the maximum number of vehicles, it will only return routes for, say you have 10 vehicles available, it'll only include routes for 7. Now there's ways you can play around with this to force all 10 vehicles to work at the same time. You have 10 drivers, and usually you use the time start, time stop to put more constraints on when the vehicles can make the deliveries, and it'll force it that it will increase the number of vehicles so that there's more routes and that there's more ways of doing it. So the idea of the optimization V2 is to be as easy for everyone to use and to cover as many use cases as possible. And it's one of those, it's, you know, it's rare sometimes that people are like, oh, we want to use all of our vehicles because it's meant to be an optimizer. It's meant to save vehicle wear and tear. It's there to reduce the amount of time that's spent, reduce the amount of distance that's spent. But for individual use cases, there are ways around it, usually playing with the times, usually playing with brakes, things like that to make your different vehicles depending on what your end uses and the outcomes you want.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, our next question. Does Mapbox have a capability to calculate distances between the points for mileage or hours to drive between them? And I think, Rob, you're going to help us with that.
Yeah, absolutely. The answer is yes. People can get this information by calling Directions API directly. Distance and duration is returned in the annotations, and we also have a Directions API playground that users can open up and plot routes and get a ton of different data back. So, yes.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, next question goes to Patrick for a maps question, mobile maps. Can you summarize the benefits of the Mapbox 11 upgrade and why should I switch?
Certainly, yeah, so we released Mapbox v11 for iOS and Android last November, and we recommend it for all customers. The major benefits I see are 3D support, especially for buildings, including our standard style, which was released as part of Mapbox v11. In addition, we introduced support for Jetpack Compose and Swift UI. It was experimental at the launch of v11, but in our latest version, 11.6, we now find it to be stable and ready for production usage. So just some improvements with developer ergonomics in both of those declarative frameworks. Lastly, I think we introduced some new profiling and debugging tools to ensure that your users are always getting the best map experience. You can monitor items like memory usage or if there's a missing map tile. So we've really expanded a lot of our internal tools to external developers so that you can debug your maps on your own. We have a blog post that summarizes a number of the other benefits, so I'll show that in the chat just after this question.
Thanks, Patrick. Let's stay with you. We had several pre-submitted questions asking about documentation resources and examples for mobile, plans to add more and that kind of thing. Could you maybe give us a summary answer?
Certainly, yeah. So the first two for Jetpack Compose and Swift UI, we've just released some new documentation for both of those accompanying version 11.6 as we move them from experimental to stable. And so I can share links to those in the chat afterwards. And then for examples more generally, we have a specific site or specific landing pages for Jetpack Compose, Swift UI, and then standard UI kit for iOS. And I can share those links. But if you're looking for something specific, we are always looking for recommendations or advice. So please feel free to share those either in the chat today or in the documentation sites. There's like a feedback button, and we monitor that regularly. And we want to make examples that are helpful for you. So please do share any use cases you'd like to see in an example.
Great. And while we've got you, Patrick, one more question for you, talking about Jetpack Compose. This is a combination of a couple different questions. Maybe could you comment on these at a high level?
Sure. Yeah. So for both Jetpack Compose and Swift UI, we move them to what we call stable from experimental, which means we believe they're ready for production. So they have been battle tested both by us and by customers in the field using them in beta applications. And so we consider them ready to go for your users. So that starts with version 11.6, which we released a few weeks ago. And then as for the roadmap, one new exciting feature we're working on is interactive features. So this allows users to work directly with elements of the map, the base map, and really adds to a kind of a more richness with user interactivity. So in our 11.7 beta, we released a little bit of a preview of that you can experiment with today. And then as that moves from beta to stable, we'll be releasing more features there. So we're very excited about it, and you can look forward to a blog post detailing it soon. But if you'd like a sneak preview, our release pages on GitHub have some information for you. And I'll share those in the chat as well.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. All right, another topic that we get many questions about is tile sets and the Mapbox tiling service. We had a few questions about this. First one over to Liz. What's the difference between hosting tile data on Mapbox servers versus hosting your own data on Postgres, PostGIS?
Well, the difference really comes down to a little bit of a matter of taste and also performance. If you want to have the most performant maps, it's a really good idea to take your large data sets and create tile sets out of them. That way, when a user comes and downloads a map, they're not going to get the entire data set at once. They're not going to have to wait for that data to transfer, and the map is going to render very quickly with your pre-tiled data. However, sometimes that data changes a lot, or it's a smaller data set, and you want to be able to put your data very quickly out of your database right directly onto a map. And in that case, the best way to do that is by exporting your data in GeoJSON directly from your PostGIS database and adding that as a layer to your map. That allows for you to add data and then update that data on the fly by updating the layer. And it's a little bit quicker to get quick changes to your maps that way. It also provides you a little more flexibility if you happen to have some pretty robust back-end tooling yourself in PostGIS. For example, if you're doing lots of points and polygon searches on the back end and you want to export those results to a map, it's nice to have that data in a database format that you can work with and then just export that and get it on the map quickly.
Great. And following up on that, another MTS specific question. Can you help us with that, Liz?
MTS and costs. This is a little bit of a complex answer because the prices are based on the amount of computer usage that you end up using. So I'll post the links at the end of this for our pricing guides for this, but it really comes down to when you're creating a tile set, the different steps that you go through incur different costs. So when you first walk through the process of creating a tile set, you upload some data and you can upload it and get it up there, and we don't charge you yet. Once you have a successful tile set built, then we will charge you based on the amount of compute units that you use. And of course, how do you calculate a compute unit? Well, that comes down to the size of the file and also the zoom level that you're tiling. The higher the zoom level, the more tiles, the more compute power that you end up using. So we have kind of a little bit of math to do in order to do that, but there is a great way to figure it out because there's a little bit of a free tier for doing this. You can actually run a sample job and then go to your tile set in Mapbox Studio and look at the usage to see how much computing power that particular tile set took. On average, most jobs run between about 0.3 compute units and 5 compute units, with our free tier sitting at 4 compute units. So you can do a little bit of experimentation to understand how your data is going to work within our tiling service. Beyond that, the other charge that there is for storage, but it's a very, very minimal charge compared to compute power. And we charge based on how many days per month you're storing a tile set. So you pay basically for storage days. A single tile set for 1 day is 1 storage day, and then we count all of those up. The last thing I'll say about this is that you do pay by the job, so that if you are updating your tile sets over and over, those do incur costs. So you want to be judicious if you're running a large amount of data very often, the zoom levels that you choose to do that in order to keep your costs in check.
Great. Thank you, Liz. Okay, we're going to stick with MTS, but specifically look at the new raster capabilities of MTS. Corey, a question for you. How can I process multiple times from a raster source file with raster MTS?
Yeah, this is a question that I've been getting relatively frequently as customers have started playing with the raster capability within MTS, and particularly because a lot of the data is weather data, which naturally has many different time steps along the forecast, and even many different levels of the atmosphere. You think of temperature at the surface, temperature of the jet stream, and everything in between. So if you go to the next slide, I actually have a little bit of a tip here for how to specify the naming of the bands within your recipe when processing a raster source. And so if you have a source file that has many different times, many different atmospheric levels, you can specify a name for each of those fields that contains multiple metadata elements. So here I have the name snippet from a recipe where I'm concatenating 3 different metadata elements. The first, this is using a GRIB example for the file format. So it would be the short name, which typically refers to the atmospheric level, at least in a weather file. So this is a 500 millibar example. The next element is called GRIB element, which would be something like temperature, which is TNP in this example. And finally, the GRIB valid time, which is seconds since epoch. And so when the tile set is processed, the output will have all of these fields joined together into one string. And so then in our SDK, GLJS is used here as an example, you can change what's called the paint property for a given raster array source. Here, if you want to display on the map the raster array band, that is this 50,000 ISBL temp with the timestamp after that, you just set the paint property with the 1 line of code, and then the appropriate data will be displayed on the map. So this is really an efficient way to do things like animations or just switching between times and fields within a raster source that you have processed.
Thanks, Corey. Staying on the theme of custom data, we'll stay with you for a second, Corey. We had this next question submitted during the keynote and wanted to discuss it here. Is there any feature to connect a Mapbox dataset directly to my database? I'm looking for a way to dynamically update my dataset as it updates in my database, Postgres SQL.
Yeah, I think my response has a couple parts. First, the short answer is no, there's no method to point Mapbox tiling service or our dataset API directly to your database. If you want to interact with those services, you always have to first dump the data into a GeoJSON format before uploading it to Mapbox tiling service. However, if your data is small enough, there's absolutely architectures you can implement to create a map that has live updating data. So you would have to do a little architecture engineering on your end to create an API that returns data from your database in GeoJSON format, but all of our SDKs can add GeoJSON at runtime. And if you want to take it a step further, you could create a WebSocket API that as data is changing on your backend, it's pushing those updates directly to all clients or applications connected to your backend. And the final part of this I'll mention is in GLJS, as of version 3.4, GeoJSON sources are able to do partial updates. If you set a property called dynamic to true when you create that GeoJSON source. And the typical example for this is if you think of a flight tracker and there's like 1,000 different planes that are being tracked on a map. If you want to update the location for a single airplane, previously the entire GeoJSON source would have to be reprocessed by the SDK. Now, if you have an ID unique to that airplane, it's able to update that single location. And so that lends itself to better performance when trying to do live updating displays. So again, to summarize, there is no direct database access to our services like MTS, but there are architectures you can implement to create a live updating map.
Fantastic. And that's why you want to work with solutions architects for this kind of advice. Thanks, Corey, and thank you, Liz. Now, looping back to the new raster features of MTS, I know we have Alistair joining us here, and Alistair showed off some of these new capabilities in the keynote. So let's take a few questions there. Alistair, what raster formats does RMTS support, and what should I do if I have an unsupported format?
Great question. So as you may be aware, there are dozens and dozens of different raster formats. Often they might be proprietary to a particular commercial software package. There are some that are more widely used. What we've done is really focus on what we've seen as the most common formats that need support when we think about what we've seen customers doing with raster data on our platform so far. So that's really working with a lot of weather data and then working with remote sensing data. So to those ends, we support, as Corey mentioned, the GRIB format, which is a common format of weather data. Also NetCDF, which we see a lot of weather source data come through. And then from an imagery perspective, like for satellite or aerial imagery, we support GeoTIFF data. That said, if you've got data in a different format that might be something proprietary or a different type, whether it's a WebP or a GeoJPEG or something like that, there are open tools like GDAL that you can use to convert the data into a format that's supported. Most of them, a conversion to like a GeoTIFF is pretty standard. So you can run that conversion and then be able to upload the data directly to raster MTS so that you can work with it and style it as you like.
Great, so you got options. One more question for you, Alistair, right now. This one more about imagery. Now that it's easier to add custom imagery via raster MTS, if I'm making a map of a location that has out-of-date imagery, which is better? Either alert Mapbox that the imagery is out of date and wait for an update, or find another source of imagery, pay for it probably, and make my own imagery layer for that location.
Sure. Another great question. I think the answer kind of depends on what your ultimate use case is and the type of data that you need to render. When we build out Mapbox Satellite, which is our imagery layer, we pull from dozens of different sources, some satellite sources, some aerial, to really put together, the single best possible global layer that we can. And so that means sometimes we need to make, compromises in terms of, maybe we source a different set of resolution than what you may need for your use case, or there may be an area where globally the only real commercial data accessible may be from a satellite, but it may be easier for you as somebody local to get a UAV up in the air and collect that little area that you need at a very high resolution with the UAV. In a case like that, it is probably better to go and, make that update as a custom layer yourself. However, I would say it's always a good idea to let us know. One of the things that the imagery team takes into account very heavily when we look at our update strategy is what are we hearing from customers? So the more that you're able to let us know, hey, I'm looking for a different, something newer or a different option for this kind of area, that goes into a big algorithm that we use to really judge where we need to make our updates. And so getting that input will help further it along. That said, while we do have multi-year agreements with commercial vendors and we're regularly scouring open source data a couple times a year, we are beholden to some of those schedules. And so it can happen that the area that you're needing may not be able to get updated in the time frame that you're looking for. So maybe, it could be an option that pursuing it yourself and using raster MTS to upload it may be the best option. But like I said, it's always a good idea to let us know, because that we can then factor it into our analysis when we're looking at our update approach and what we need to do and how we prioritize.
Thanks, Alistair. All right, from maps, let's turn to search. We have a few questions all about Mapbox search. I think Murat and Ansel are going to be helping with the next few ones. So what are the differences for search box, address autofill, and geocoding? Why and when should I use one instead of the others?
Yes, all those products are in the Mapbox search portfolio. And basically, all of them are search products and used in different settings and use cases, slightly different. So let's start with geocoding. Geocoding is primarily an address product. So if your use case involves either finding a location for a given address or finding the address for a given location, with coordinates, you can use geocoding, and it focuses specifically on addresses. Right now, when you go geocoding, there are some POIs as well, like prominent places like airports, big shopping malls. But going to the future, we're moving POIs out of geocoding. So geocoding when it was solely a address product. Address autofill is a nice utility. If you're running an e-commerce website, for example, putting an address for delivery is very important. So address autofill makes it very easy for customers to enter an address, and the address got to be structured in the addressing format so you can capture this and make it available in your use case. So it's a very nice utility to unblock users to put in the address either in a website or a mobile application. Searchbox is our all-encompassing product, and it has POIs plus addresses and locations. So if your use case requires users to find coffee shops, shopping malls, all interesting places plus addresses, Searchbox is way to go. Typically, it's all encompassing, so all the data sources will be available for your users to search. So again, geocoding is primarily address products and address autofill, and Searchbox is supporting most use cases that involves POIs plus addresses.
Great. We had another question about Searchbox. Would it be possible to use Searchbox in a way that would give results for all cities around the world, but specifically exclude the USA?
Yeah, so this is kind of a fun question. Currently today, we do not support specifically excluding any country in your search results, but you can still accomplish this by adding a parameter for country, and then you can provide all the country codes, 2-digit ISO 3166_1, country codes, comma separated, and specify what all countries you do want to search. And so to actually accomplish this, you could specify all the countries in the world and omit the US, and it would be able to search everywhere and exclude the US.
Neat, some creative problem solving there. Let's see, we got some more search questions, I think. Let's see. Right, okay, this is a details API question. Do you provide POI unique IDs of other POI database, meaning can we get the TripAdvisor unique ID associated with a Mapbox POI or for another service like Yelp or Foursquare?
Yeah, I'll answer that. Details API is a new product in our search portfolio. Basically, what it does is you give Details API a Mapbox ID and get back details about this place. Either it could be a POI details, like what is POI, the description, photos, and things like that, or for addresses, going to be address details. So typically in our data sets, we combine data from multiple resources. It could be like internal sources, like our first party data and other external vendors. And when interacting with Details API and also with other search endpoints, if this data is coming from a third-party provider, you will see an ID related to this specific feature in an external ID field. So we always expose this ID for to support your use case. If it's an internal data point, like it's generated by Mapbox, and you will see a Mapbox ID for that. So yes, if the data is coming from a third-party sources, we always provide the ID within the response.
Yeah. And one more prepared submitted question here for search. I think Ansel, you're going to help with this. I want to reverse geocode to get the name of a point of interest. For example, from a lat long, I want to fetch the address as well as the name of the business located at that address if one exists. It sounds like this person was testing it and didn't seem to be working the way they expected. Is it possible?
So yes, it is possible. So the way that you would want to be able to do this is we have a reverse endpoint for Searchbox. And so what you can do is you can provide a location and it will return back all of the various types of data that we provide. So it could be places, postcodes, addresses, POIs for that location. And so for this particular use case, what you would want to do is specify your location and additionally add the parameter for types. And depending on whether or not you always wanted to get an address, regardless of whether or not there was a POI there, or you could specify address and POI as comma separated types in the type parameter. But if you know that there's going to be a POI there, you could just specify POI, and then there's actually a property within the POI that would also have the address information in the response. And so that's how you can take a set of coordinates and find out what POI is there and the address.
Awesome. Thanks, search team. If folks have more questions about search, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. We do have a lot of pre-submitted questions, but we should still have some time to help with live, or we can type in answers in the Q&A box as well. All right, so let's move on to some navigation related questions. I think Antonio, you're helping with these. So first question, how can I override defaults in the navigation SDK to use metric units for distance in an Android Auto main car session?
Great question. The answer is yes. You can change the units. And funny enough, I just saw someone in the Q&A submitting this exact question. So we are going to kill two birds, one stone. In order to do this, the trick is you don't need to change the settings for your car session. You want to change the options for your navigation SDK. So within the navigation options, there is a distance for matter options field that will let you choose between imperial and metric. You will pass those options to your navigation instance. You will need to restart the navigation instance, and you'll be able to see the change in units.
Yes, thanks. That's live answering the question from Dave there. That's great. Okay, one more for you, Antonio. Does the Android Auto map run off of my mobile app's map view, or does it have its own separate view that can be controlled by a specific location provider on its own?
Awesome. Another Android Auto question. So I'm also going to post the docs on the chat so that everybody can have access to the latest version of the documentation. And by the way, these helpers are very helpful. We can use the questions to understand if we can improve our documentation. So I'll make sure that I review to make sure that all of this is clear. Now, to answer this question, the way Android Auto is architected, you can think of it as a separate view because it comes with a separate rendering surface. So when we are building the map component for Android Auto, and all the widgets that come with the map for navigation, like the route light component or the location pack or any of the widgets that you see on the screen, that is a separate view. However, for consistency with the rest of the application, we do use the same location provider that we use for the rest of the navigation SDK, so that whether you are using a map on the phone or in the car, you are seeing the car in the same position. So different views, but same location provider.
There we go. All right, thanks, Antonio. Now, for our next question, we'll go back to Maps and Joel. So we've seen some recent announcements and updates about Mapbox Standard, but I don't fully understand what is standard and how/why should I use it. We had a couple other related questions like what is Mapbox Standard and how do I update my maps to use Mapbox Standard? So Joel, you want to give us an overview?
Yeah, I will. We could spend a long time talking about standards. So let me just start by saying I will post some links as soon as I'm done in the chat that will allow you to go much deeper than we'll be able to go in this session. But let me provide a pretty good overview for people. Let's start with why standard, and the real reason for that is just to make life easier for people who don't want to become mapping experts, but want to be able to quickly build a map. A typical map from Mapbox can have over 100 layers. You've got to understand data schemes, zoom levels, a bunch of stuff. We abstract all of that away for you when you use standard. So it is a beautiful 3D capable map that we make really easy for you to use. It's got all the Mapbox data and POIs, landmark buildings. We did just an amazing job with dynamically responding to different light conditions. So you get a really full-featured, beautiful-looking map without having to build it from the ground up. So that's kind of the why and what it is. How do I update the maps? So as Patrick talked about earlier, we have new versions of our SDK. So you need to be on version 11 of both iOS and Android to take advantage of standard. And for web users, if you're using GLJS, you need to be on version 3. So once you've done that, then the process of transitioning to standard really isn't that hard. If you're adding custom layers to your map today dynamically, you're just going to use add layer and decide kind of which of the preset slots in the standard map that we've given to you, and you can just drop in your custom layers there. If you're using Studio and you're maintaining custom layers there, then you'll need to add those in an instance of the standard style from Studio inside of the application. So either way, whether you're dynamically adding them or using Studio, we make it fairly simple for you to then update standard as your base map with your custom layers, and then you have all of the advantages of standard going forward.
Great, thank you, Joel. That's a great summary. And we're going to stay in the world of maps, and we've got a question here for Sam about globe and kind of positioning the map when it opens. So these are two questions combined. How can I centralize the globe on load to start focused on a specific country? And how to open a Mapbox map at a correct zoom and coordinate for just a US state, for example, California.
Awesome. So my first recommendation is to consider if your application is a California map, meaning it's always going to be framing California. If that's the case, you might want to look at actually creating a copy of the style and then updating the initial camera in the style itself. That way, if you use this map in multiple applications, you'll have one place where you can update the starting location. If your map is dynamic, meaning it opens up in different locations for the user, then you can initialize your map using the map init options. And a very easy way that you could accomplish this dynamically would be to do a reverse geocode for the user with the region that would get you back the state that they're in. And then that response contains a bounding box, which you can use to frame your initial map camera.
Right, thanks, Sam. Yeah, lots of different creative ways to use kind of bounds and bounding boxes and zoom levels. Okay, staying with maps, we've got a question here for Stefan. Thoughts on using React MapGL for developing Mapbox in React versus just using Mapbox's regular JS library? And then a related question about the React MapGL wrapper and whether that we recommend using that one or MapGL in our examples.
Yes, so GLJS has a long history. We recently hit like 10 years mark of the project, and there are a lot of different React libraries and libraries for different front-end frameworks that was built around GLJS. And some of them are pretty good, like the React MapGL from the VizGL project is pretty good. It's pretty mature. It has a wide adoption across the React ecosystem, and it covers a lot of like different use cases, a lot of most common use cases. So this is definitely a big plus. So if you want to start with something simple, you can really start with React MapGL, and it should probably work for you. But you should always remember of some disadvantages of using React wrappers around GLJS. So it covers only common use cases. And imagine if you have some kind of more complex logic involving GLJS, you would need to unwrap the Mapbox GL map instance and use some kind of imperative API as opposed to the declarative API in the React. So this would be a bit harder, and you need to track the state yourself. And that would be it. And also one thing to remember is that every time when the Mapbox GL map initialized, it fires the map load event, which is billable. And you need to remember to keep your map instance alive, so you don't have the more billable events. So keep an eye on the remounts of the map component. And as of preferences, I would say the VizGL project is pretty good, and React MapGL is pretty good.
Great, thanks. We've got one more question for you, Stefan, about GLJS. So the question is, are partial JSON updates done automatically by Mapbox GLJS, Or do developers need to determine which part of the JSON has changed and use a partial update operation?
Yeah, well, developers need to know what kind of features are updated. So imagine a use case when the taxi cab model is running around the city in the standard style, and you want to update this car position on each frame, and you can use this update data method of the GeoJSON source, and that would update it smoothly. So this is built for this kind of cases, and you need to know what kind of feature you want to update.
Great, thanks. All right, I've got a question here for Sean. So this one about moving custom maps between accounts. A colleague made a custom map and now needs to transfer the project to me. What are the steps involved in transferring a map to my account?
Hey, yeah, so the easiest way to transfer a map to one account to another is going to be making the style for that map public, and then sharing the allow copying link. So if you're logged into a Mapbox account, this link will allow you to then copy the style directly into your account. Now, if the style for some reason can't be made public, then you can take the style.json, which can be downloaded from the first account, and then that file in turn can be directly uploaded to the new account. But just a warning, if the style has any custom sprites, those sprites will need to be downloaded and re-uploaded once again. And if the style contains a custom tile set, you're going to want to likely re-upload that data as a tile set or data set to process as well.
Thanks, Sean. One more for you, Sean, while we've got you. Can I use custom styles with the Android SDK, and how?
The answer is yes. So I do have some links that I can throw into the chat after I finished here. But yeah, so the Mapbox mobile SDKs can utilize custom styles created in Studio from your Mapbox account. Custom style can be set by providing and map init options with your custom styles URI directly to the map views constructor, or by calling one of the load style APIs on the Mapbox map class. Additionally, with Jetpack Compose, you're able to provide a custom style to the Mapbox map composable, and developers using Android views, you can provide a URI to the Mapbox style URI XML attribute as well.
Thanks, Sean. Staying on the topic of custom maps, I think, Leah, you're going to help us with some questions about making custom maps.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. We have a question on how to make a custom map or how to customize colors that's used on the map. And this is going to be, first mostly done in Studio. You'll want to start with the right base map. We talked a bit about standard. So if you're building brand new, give standard a try. There's a lot of benefits there with standard. And then you're going to want to customize the style within the Mapbox Studio style editor. So within Mapbox Studio, you can change colors, fonts, labels. You can do a lot more than just colors, but essentially you're building that custom style within Studio, and then you can add that style so that it is running dynamically on your map. And you can reference that style to run dynamically. You can lighten or darken the map based on time of day and other interesting runtime features. But essentially, you're going to want to be sure that you've got that loaded into your application or on your website so that that custom style is applying to the map that you've built. And I can drop some links into the chat here. And actually, it looks like Sean had already posted some of the style guides. I'll throw in another Studio manual so that you can take a look at how to build in Studio and get that custom style that you're wanting.
Great, thanks. And a similar kind of question about getting started. Maybe Rebecca, you can help with this one. Someone who's brand new to Mapbox, where should they start, especially for web maps?
Yeah, great question. I would highly recommend looking at the Getting Started guides that we have in our documentation center. specifically the Mapbox GLJS if you want to start building a web map. We've got some really great product-specific guides and tutorials that will walk you through the basics of working with Mapbox step by step, and a section specifically on how to build a sample map using GLJS. So I'll share some links in the chat as well, but if you go to docs.mapbox.com, search Getting Started, and you'll have what you need to start building.
Great, thanks. And Rebecca, one more quick question for you. Is it possible to make a Mapbox map with WordPress? Is there a plugin that might help?
Yes, there is a plugin. This was created by Mapster, and so you don't have to try to remember that link. I will also drop that in the chat.
Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, we've got a couple more pre-submitted questions here. I know I see folks rapidly helping with questions that are in the Q&A, so we should be all right for time. Let's see here. Leah, can you help with this question? This is asking about the AI assistant that's on the docs sites and also in the Mapbox developer Discord. So asking, is there a confidentiality agreement outlined for the AI assistant, especially in relation to using it in any way to check code? And similarly, is the information that I submit to the help AI stored somewhere? If so, is there a way to opt out or request that that information be deleted?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this question actually came up in our session on support yesterday, so we're answering it here. We ran out of time yesterday. And we do store the information that you're asking with Kappa AI. It's stored in an interface provided by Kappa AI, but we do have a confidentiality agreement with our AI vendor that we're not using that information to train the language model. It's not going to be used to further train their AI. And you're completely anonymous within that interface. We don't actually know who's asking questions and don't have any PII or other information stored with it. If you do intend to have the conversation deleted, you can submit a request. We can delete that. You would need to include some identifying information to help us find that communication, as we won't know what communication is yours given that anonymity. But if you're concerned about something being stored, you can always submit that and we can remove it.
All right, thanks, Leah. Okay, we've got a question came in yesterday's AMA. Actually, we wanted to address it here because we've got Alistair. Are there plans to offer standard pre-processed RMTS datasets such as worldwide 10-meter wind, or is this likely at a stage to remain as a kind of bring or process your own data?
Sure. Good question. So right now, this is about bringing your own data and turning that into tile sets. We do have some data sets from, it's a global forecast system data, which provides global weather from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency here in the US that are available. It actually, we did a release of Studio yesterday that makes them available for you to go and be able to play around with. So you can work with that and try that out and see what you can do with what raster MTS can output and how you can take advantage of that with our renderers. But at this point, there are no plans to offer any pre-processed data sets, and it is about taking your own data and turning it into tile sets for you and your customers to use.
Great, thanks, Alistair. Well, okay, that's all of our pre-submitted and referred questions. And I know that the team's been busy answering the questions submitted in the Q&A box. If you do have one, we've got a couple more minutes. I see, Andrew, you wanted to add some color to the question about WordPress and maps?
Yeah, so WordPress is, of course, a complex content management system that has a lot of plugins and ecosystem. So you can use that Mapster plugin, which is great. It seems very powerful. You can also just use straight JavaScript and HTML as well. One thing that I've done a lot in WordPress, if you want to plot your own custom data in markers or points on the map, is you could create a custom post type in WordPress. Let's say post type for store locator, for instance. And then you can use WordPress's REST API to request that store locator data from WordPress's backend, and then render those markers on the front end. And basically, you're just going to build a custom template with the Mapbox GLJS map instantiated on it, and you're going to run your REST requests to the backend to render your data there. So You can do it with plugins, you can do it classic, but yeah, it is easily accessible in a few ways in WordPress.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Well, I think that is it for this year's AMA. Thank you, everybody who submitted questions ahead of time, who asked questions in other sessions and had them referred, and folks joining us live here to ask additional questions. And a big thank you to all of our Mapbox speakers. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and being willing to be answering questions right on the spot here in our AMA. Now, this was our very last session of Build with Mapbox 2024. Thank you to everyone who tuned in throughout the week and folks who are catching up on the recordings afterwards. All folks who had registered for Build, you will be receiving a survey link by email. We would love to get your feedback on the content of the week, what you'd like to see next time. We read all of those responses very carefully, and it helps us shape the kinds of content and events that we put on. And so, yeah, hope to see you next year at our upcoming events. We hope the week has given you new ideas and tools to build successfully with Mapbox. See you next year. Thank you, everybody.